Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Michael Regina. I'm the author and illustrator of the all-ages horror graphic novel, The Sleepover. Perfect for this upcoming spooky season, so if you've never given it a read, please go check it out. And this morning I'm recording a little bit earlier for something I'm going to talk about later in this video, but I talk a lot on this channel about the idea that I am a dad with a full-time job and I still make graphic novels professionally, and I try to give you guys encouragement on how you could do the same and make your own books and still go through all this. And something I thought would be an interesting kind of peek behind the curtain would be to look at, how do I do this? Like, what does my specific routine look like? How do I set up and plan for a day? And, what's my current process look like? A little bit of a spoiler alert, it changes quite frequently because life changes, but I can talk about the general principles I've used and where I'm currently at to try to get this next book, Deepwater Creek, finished on time in a little less than 2 months. So I figured that would be what I would talk about. So before I get started on this video, I wanted to say thank you to everyone who's new here, everyone who subscribed and enjoyed the last video I made on the importance of learning how to finish. It was awesome to see the channel grow so much from that. And if you aren't a subscriber, please like and subscribe, comment below. It's been awesome hearing from all of you, and I'd love to hear what your process is for making graphic novels if you were doing this sort of thing. All right, so before I dive into this video, I want to talk about what my personal process looks like currently. So it's going to be highly specific to what am I doing, and then maybe some general principles along the way. And then at the end, I want to have a word on the concept of burnout, like burning out on our projects and in life, and how I am learning currently to manage that alongside this workload that I'm about to outline for you. So let's dive into that. So to start, I want to say that I like to get up early in the morning to work rather than stay up late. Now, that isn't for everybody, but for me personally, I used to be more of a night owl, and I've transitioned to waking up early because I found that for me, working later was actually a more miserable experience. By the end of the day, I was often super tired and unable to get much work done, or I would push my way through all this, but I was just absolutely miserable. I needed things to keep myself awake, and I would be falling asleep at my desk, and it was just not an enjoyable process. And I discovered that if I actually intentionally flipped myself from a night schedule to a morning schedule, I was just as effective early, and I was able to finish up around the time I would go to start my day job, and I will have made some good progress on the projects that needed to be done for the day and have a pretty good idea of like, hey, here's how much work I was able to get done. I'm going to have to find some other time in the rest of the day to finish, or potentially I'm just done, depending on how well that morning went. So currently, the first thing I do is I wake up, I get myself a cup of coffee, and I sit down and I start working out and planning out my day. Now, if you see my notebook video, you'll see that I currently bullet journal using a Kindle Scribe. And basically, I plot out, I spend the first few minutes of the morning typically just jotting down kind of what am I hoping to accomplish for the day, both in my personal life and in my day job. And I just sort of mark down, these are the things I hope to get accomplished throughout the day. This just gives me a good beat on, what am I planning for? I'm done with that. I actually spend a little bit of time on a personal project first. This is more of a recent development, and I'll talk about that more later. But I've learned that for me, spending a few minutes before I dive in on the comic on something a little bit different that gets my juices flowing, that is not related to anything, has been a great way to start my day. From there, I slide over to my drawing table because I'm currently in the process of watercoloring my comic. I usually go over to my art desk and I sit down and I watercolor a little bit. The bulk of my daily to-dos is basically I have about 100 pages left in my comic book to finish watercoloring, so that needs to get the full brunt of my attention, and I will sit down and I will work on watercoloring all the way up until about the time it is to leave for the day or get started on the job. A recent hack that I learned about from another YouTuber named Austin Schrock has been super helpful, because something I discovered recently was that I was not moving nearly fast enough to get all the watercolors done that needed to get done in the amount of time that I had. And I was beginning to think, this is just impossible. There's zero way I'm going to be able to get this done. But this is sort of a recent hack from Austin Schrock. He made a video about sort of the time method. I can't remember the specific words that he used, but basically setting an amount of time in which you hope to get the project done. You set a timer. So I went and bought this digital timer on the internet, on Amazon, and you try to accomplish the task in that allotted time period that you've given it. And I realized that I could basically get a watercolored page done in anywhere about an hour and a half, somewhere around an hour and a half. So I sit down, I set a timer for about 40 minutes. I work those 40 minutes trying to finish, if possible, whatever step of the comic I'm in during that period. And when I'm done, take a quick break, set it again, and go on to the next one. And generally, I'm hoping to get somewhere around a page done in the morning before I have to do anything else. Because I have a day job, it's really difficult for me to say like my goal for the entire day is like with no time constraints on it is to try to get 2 pages done a day. I don't have 6, 7, 8, 9 hours to do this. I typically have somewhere between 2.5 hours in the morning with an additional hour or 2 throughout the rest of the day, kind of interspersed throughout other things. So it becomes really important for me to like make sure I'm focusing during those intense periods of work. And this process of using sort of the timer has been an extremely helpful one, because it keeps me looking at the clock and going, I actually have 40 minutes to get this thing done. Can I do it? I found that if I don't do this, I kind of just sit around and I work, but I'm kind of leisurely about it. I'm just taking my time, which is nice. I just don't have the time for it. So doing this makes sure that I'm as effective as possible. So I'll link the video that Austin made in the description. I think you might find that super helpful, because I thought it was really helpful. Once the day gets going and my wife and kids get awake and I have to go into work and all, it becomes really difficult to actually know what kind of availability I'm going to have throughout the day. So I'm actually just sort of looking for time at any given point where I can maybe take a break or something like that and just make a little bit of progress on it and use my time effectively, rather than like scrolling the internet or something like that. Often lunchtime is a great time to do this because it's personal time. There's a block of it. Rather than completely goofing off and just doing something meaningless, I'm like, you know what? Why don't I sit down and work on this page a little bit? Often by this point, through the end of the day, once work is done, I've still got a good bit of work I need to get accomplished before I can go to bed that evening. Now, the goal, my ideal, would be to have everything done that needs to be done by dinner time. So I've gotten all the comic work that needs to be done, I'm done with my day job, all that stuff, and now I'm just in leisure time. When I'm really early on in a project, or I'm just writing or something like this and I'm not doing art, it's a lot easier for me to say, you know what, I cranked out 2-3 hours of writing in the morning, there's no art that needs to be done, I'm done. But when I'm in art production, the quotas become very specific, right? So it's like I have to get 2 pages done a day to actually be done. So what I have to do is look at that and go, did I hit those numbers? And if I didn't hit those numbers, that means I've got to continue to carve out space between dinner time and bedtime to finish. This gets really nebulous because I don't like doing work when I'm supposed to be with my family and with friends. And so for me, often what this might mean is if I have a lot of work to do, we might decide as a family to sit down and after dinner paint and draw at the table for a little bit, and we'll just sort of commiserate and chat and do all that while I continue to work. Or if they all want to watch something, I'll load up some part of the digital process that I need to do onto my iPad, and I will continue to work on the iPad until, while we're watching something, or whatever the case might be. But the general idea here is that what I'm hopefully doing towards the end of the day is like picking up the scraps of what remains, rather than having to do all the work in the evening. Every once in a while, I've had a busy day, like I either had lunch plans or I had a meeting, or I spent some time with the family during a break or something like that. Like yesterday, I decided to take my daughter out to lunch, so I lost what I might have used as a bit of time to get a little bit of progress in, to go have some lunch with her and visit, and totally worth it. But that meant that in the evening, I needed a little bit more work to do. So at about 10 o'clock, which is usually when the kids are off to bed, I sit down and continue working for another hour or so that I can get in bed around 11:30 at night. And one of the most important principles in this whole entire process is this understanding of, like I keep mentioning that I have numbers. Well, I have so many pages that I need to get done to be on track. If you were to look at my comics planning spreadsheet, it's very specific. It tells me if I don't hit those numbers, I am technically behind schedule. Now, as I'm getting closer and closer to the end of this project, those numbers that I have to hit on a daily basis are becoming increasingly unrealistic. What I have to do is actually establish a concept that Greg McKeown talks about in his book Effortless, this idea of upper and lower bounds. Meaning that there is a minimum amount of work that I want to get done a day and a maximum amount of work I want to get done every day. And I'll try not to fall below, and I'll try not to go above. It's very hard to go above, frankly, but I definitely try to make sure that I don't fall below that minimum viable number, that minimum number. And this for me currently is, I usually try to take like a half step off one way or the other. So like, let's say I have to do 2 pages a day. The lower bounds might be I'm going to do 1.5 pages, and the upper bounds might be 2.5 pages. So, or it could just be the actual number. But at least I'm like, well, if I at least hit 1.5 pages for the day, I can consciously, like set this aside and say I'm done because I've hit the number, right? So that's kind of my main way of thinking. So if I get to that end of the day and I know I've hit my lower bounds, continuing to work is actually more of a decision rather than a necessity. Even though I know I'm at least like close enough to that number that it's not egregiously throwing me off, and I can then take a look and say, like, is there another opportunity to make this up at some point? It's just hard. And so that generally makes up my day. But if this sounds like a lot, it's because it is, quite frankly. This is a lot of work, and trying to do this on top of a job is frankly not particularly ideal. And that's why I wanted to talk about this, about burnout a little bit, because this is not necessarily going to be a schedule that works for everybody. And in fact, I don't know that I would recommend anyone specifically follow it. I'm just saying that's where I'm at currently as I'm nearing the deadline of my book. There's a lot of work that needs to get done on a daily basis. Thankfully, as I've continued to work with my publisher, we've been able to extend deadlines without losing our release date, and that's really helped me. But this would not necessarily be what I would want to tell somebody that they should ideally do. Frankly, for me, if all I had to do was ink or color a single page a day from an artwork perspective, that's a lot, but that's totally like manageable. I could do a page a day, no problem. But when you get into that 2.5, 3, it's just, that's so much work. And frankly, in honesty, I was burning out pretty hard a few weeks ago. I was looking at all this work that needed to be done, and I was completely consumed with like, man, there is so much to do here, and I just don't have the time. And I start to beat myself up over this because I'm looking at it going, I should be able to hit this. I need to hit this number. Everybody in my life needs to give me the space to do this, and yada, yada, yada. I was having, I was becoming incredibly stressed out because I realized I couldn't do this work. It's too much work. And internally, I was becoming resentful of people in my life, thinking like, why aren't they giving me more time? Why aren't the kids helping more around the house? Whatever the case might be. I realized that I was doing this, and I sort of stopped and realized like, oh no, I'm just burned out. Like, they're not doing anything specifically mean or mean-spirited. It's just me. I'm incredibly burned out because I've put too much on my plate. And as I sat back and I started to think about this, I was asking myself like, well, what is there anything I'm noticing in my life that when I do it differently, that feeling of burnout is relieved regardless of the amount of work that's happening? And something actually clicked in my mind. I was out with my daughter one night. She was at a birthday party, and I had gone off to go work. And while I was waiting on her to finish the party, and during that process, I was just like stressed out, just trying to work through this book, right? Just grinding through it. And I gave myself a mental note. I was like, 30 minutes before I have to leave to go get her, I need to take a break real quick, and I want to work on this this RPG module for the game Mothership before I go pick them up. And it was entirely a project built for me. No one's expecting anything of me from it. And I got to tell you, within that 30 minutes of time of just like, I want to sit down and work on this for some fun, I was so energized and rejuvenated by it that it really made me stop and go like, what was that? In this period of burnout, I realized something, that you have to make space in your life for play. During this process. If everything in your life becomes a sense of obligation, meaning like I wake up in the morning, I have to do this, I have to do that, and even your creativity, your projects of working on book stuff just feels like one obligation after another, you're going to eventually really burn out on this process and become a bit resentful of it and maybe the other people in your life, and you start taking things out on you. And I discovered that even 15 to 20 minutes of play a day is incredibly rejuvenating, and it gives me a place where I can explore and have fun, and I don't need to feel like I'm dropping the ball. Now, play can be a lot of things to different people. Some people sitting down and playing a video game for 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes or whatever is like totally rejuvenating, or reading a book. For me, I actually play by creating. I love creating stuff. It's why role-playing games have been so fun to me, and why continuing to make books is so fun to me. And so when I talked earlier about spending the first 15 to 20 minutes on a personal project, that was something I've reinstated recently after this period of burnout, where I realized like, oh, if I just spend a little bit of part of my morning on something that I'm enjoying for myself, it's actually really rejuvenating. It gives me something to look forward to, and I can express myself in a way that doesn't feel like it's always focused on this one thing. So you might have noticed that I've been back on YouTube a whole lot more in the last few weeks, and that's because part of the way I've been giving myself an additional place to play has been getting back to doing this sort of thing. So that's sort of my word on burnout. It's definitely going to happen. I'm probably going to have to keep reminding myself of this, of like, hey, you're getting stressed out. Make sure you're giving yourself some time to play. You're spending some time with your family. It's okay if you need to put the page down for a minute and go do something else for a little while. These things are good and healthy. And here's the truly remarkable thing about the whole thing. When I've been doing this, I'm actually more effective at getting my job done because I've given myself some mental space to recuperate. So I'm hitting my numbers better than ever since then. And I'm actually doing more things. It's really weird. But anyway, that's my routine. That's what I'm working through currently. Like I said, it's a lot. I'm very much looking forward to being on the other side of this project and getting some downtime. So, part of this whole thing is at the end of a project like this, like I talked about in my last video, it gets hard towards the end. It's incredibly difficult. It's almost like, you're reaching that finale and there's just so much work that's on top of it. But then after that, there's a really good period of just downtime and rest and rejuvenation. And I'm so looking forward to that. And then that will start up a whole new routine of what does my day look like as I start crafting my next project. But that's my current daily routine. I generally work within this framework. Even if I'm writing, I wake up early, I write, I take a break. I might write a little bit more in the rest of the day, but I definitely finish a little earlier when I'm writing. And I hope this was helpful. I'd love to hear what your own processes are like, and hopefully this maybe has been helpful for you in just getting a sense for what everything's involved. Thank you again for being on this channel. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear me talk some more about your day job and how to be productive, check out this video right here, in which I talk about how your day job can actually be a huge benefit to you as you pursue your career in comics and art and so on. Thanks for being here. Talk to you next time.